This is Fights Camera Action, where we feature wild, dramatic and crazy confrontations in the raw from the people who were right there in the heart of the action.
Oh my God!
So see your camera? Oh.
In this Fights Camera Action World Cup special, we'll be taking a look at violent and disorderly behaviour surrounding the World Cup and what to expect in Russia. We'll take a look at fans from around the world, the good, the bad, and the unforgettable. From those fans who prefer a footballing fiesta to those who'd rather have a footy-based fight. From the old-school troublemakers to the bust-ups in Brazil at the last World Cup. And find out what we expect Russia 2018 to hold in store for fans. We'll be featuring violent clashes, vicious individuals and dramatic scenes filmed by eyewitnesses caught up in trouble. Also, we'll hear from people involved in the action to find out how it started and what really went down.
It went from being a normal protest with heavy police presence to becoming, basically felt like a war zone.
Plus, we'll speak to Martha Newson, a behavioural expert who works with football fans and hooligans in the field of group aggression. And Martin King, former member of Chelsea Headhunters and author of several books on the subject of hooliganism. Be warned to expect some shocking and brutal scenes and strong language throughout. The FIFA World Cup is one of the greatest sporting events on the planet, adored by fans and audiences across the globe. The stage is set for the next World Cup, Russia 2018. It's going to be one of the most exciting tournaments ever, played across 11 cities, with the final in Moscow at the newly renovated Luzhniki Stadium.
The World Cup is an unusually powerful international event, bringing people together from all across the world. Most nations have a chance to get in. It really reflects this very deep tribal psychology to commit to your group and show your allegiance for it.
This will be the most watched World Cup ever, reaching millions across the globe on TV, the internet and via social media. And more than ever, fans will be filming plenty of special moments of their time at the World Cup. Like this one.
When we have national tournaments, you get national identities coming together with football identities. And when the two meet, we have this powerful, almost tribal energy.
So let's kick off all the way back at the Mexico World Cup in 1986. Yes, it was relatively trouble-free. But at this famous clash between England and Argentina at the Azteca Stadium, an ugly fight breaks out. As well as throwing rocks and bottles, they were even using banners to fight each other. Reports said over 100 England fans got caught up in the trouble, in one of the worst incidents of its kind at a World Cup tournament. One fan tries to get out of harm's way up on the railings, a tactic that didn't work out too well. Now, the police arrive, but let's face it, they've no chance of stopping this mob. In another part of the stadium during the game, there is more trouble with England and Argentina fans. It starts with a tussle about flag waving before turning into a bit of flag slapping. A tug of war ensues with the Union Jack as Argentina fans try to snatch it away. When the flag's ripped in half, it kicks off into a full-blown fistfight. But after throwing a few punches, most of the England fans are forced back before the police step in to calm things down. The game famously ended with England getting knocked out by Maradona's hand of God goal, which probably didn't do too much to cool the atmosphere.
What we're seeing here is the use of national symbols. Fans are literally fighting over their flags. National symbols like flags take on a huge amount of importance to fans and to civilians. In the case of football, the national identity is coming together with their football identity. So they're particularly keen to show that they're more powerful than the other side.
Now on to the next World Cup, Italia 90. England fans are out in much larger numbers. For the game against the Netherlands, it all starts off in a joyful mood. Then, as the Italian police block the main road, the England fans try to push their way through. Take a note of the guy at the front with the curly hair, khaki jacket and denim shorts, because we'll see him again in a minute. Meanwhile, the police go on the assault with truncheons, causing the fans to retreat. But instead of dispersing, the fans come back with missiles, which is met by tear gas and a more forceful police response. The police chase fans around the streets of Cagliari and come across our curly-haired guy again, who fends them off to escape down the street. The mood is much more subdued as the fans are brought under control, with some fans contained at a petrol station forecourt, whilst others get help with their injuries. A heavy police presence ensures that there is no more commotion as fans enter the stadium. And after all that, the match ended in a 0-0 draw. Coming up, we'll be taking a closer look at home to see how our domestic football fans have behaved down the years. And we'll meet a former member of a notorious Chelsea firm to get his take on football violence and his thoughts on this year's tournament. This is Fights Camera Action, World Cup Special. Now, we're looking at incidents with English football fans, and plenty of footage has been caught on camera over the years, as these next clips show. Here, Arsenal and Tottenham fans face off outside the ground. While at Wembley, Millwall fans are scrapping amongst themselves in the stands. Allegedly, it began after a child was pushed over by a drunken fan. Millwall Football Club threatened to hand out lifetime bans to anyone found responsible.
Look at the outfield, waving in.
To get an insight into how football thuggery has evolved from the early days up to the present, we spoke to Martin King, former member of Chelsea Headhunters and author of several books on the subject of hooliganism.
I'm a Chelsea supporter, been going since 1963, been going with the so-called chaps, firm, mob, whatever you want to call it, at football, since about 1966. There was a lot of trouble following England in the 80s. They had a reputation, England fans, of wearing Union Jack shorts and England shirts and getting on the lash and getting drunk and throwing beer and bottles at the locals wherever they went.
But it's often the domestic rivalries that get fans worked up the most. In the run-up of the notorious 2007 Leeds versus Millwall match, the police efforts to keep fans separate doesn't quite go according to plan. Here's Martin's take on what went down.
For security reasons, they seem to have put a lot of Millwall fans on buses. The buses then pull up outside the stadium. They seem to have allowed the Leeds supporters to congregate around the area where the buses have pulled up. The Millwall fans, being very impatient, decided to kick the windows in on the bus, climb through the windows, or open the emergency doors and all the doors, and try to pile out to where the Leeds fans look to be about 20, 30 yards away. Well, they're an easy target if you're an opposition van stuck on a bus. So if someone's going to throw bricks and smash the windows, your sort of response is to get out and engage.
Some might call this classic hooligan behaviour, but Martin disagrees.
To me, a hooligan, whether it's a football hooligan or an hooligan, to me a hooligan is someone who kicks wing mirrors up the cars when they come out of the pub, or smashes phone boxes up. Football. It's a high-intensity sport and people get involved in it, and sometimes drink plays a part, sometimes emotions play a part. To me, there's no such thing as a football hooligan.
Some of the biggest clashes are at local derbies.
The London derbies, it goes way back to the 60s, and it still carries on. There's hatred. Millwall, West Ham, Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal, Tottenham. Big derbies, Chelsea, Fulham. It's big hatred amongst the supporters because it's inbred in these teams, the rivalry. What makes a local derby is bragging rights. You can go to school, you can go to work the next day and take the mick out of your workmate or your schoolmate or someone you know, giving the other person untold grief about your team beating their team. Arsenal v Tottenham, it looks like the Tottenham fans have arrived at the Emirates. Arsenal fans have obviously been waiting for them to turn up, with quite a few Arsenal faces there waiting for their rivals to turn up. They're on the forecourt outside the stadium. It kicks off a bit where Tottenham fans look like they're going into Arsenal fans fighting back. Then both sets of fans realise that the police are filming it. So that sort of stops it escalating into anything major. I wouldn't be surprised if quite a few of them weren't nicked a few weeks afterwards.
Football violence inevitably makes the headlines, but today's fans are relatively well behaved, with yearly football-related arrests down to 1,600 recently, compared to 6,000 in the late 80s.
It's a different type of audience now, which goes to football. There's more women, there's more children, it's far safer. All-seater stadiums have gone a long way to eradicating violence or trouble inside the grounds. And the police, after about 50 years, have got their heads around segregation. Yeah, the middle-class audience attending football now has lessened any trouble. They're there to watch football. They're not there to have a punch-up. They're there to have a £10 hot dog and a £10 glass of Coke or whatever. Violence still exists at football, away from the stadium, very rarely near the stadium, because of CCTV, because of heavy police. But it still goes on.
So in general, fans are behaving much better now than they've done in the past. Take a look at these Irish fans at the Euros in 2016. They're in the mood to party, and it's so infectious, they can command a whole street of international fans to sit down. And also, no one can escape the friendly attitude of Irish football fans.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
And when it comes to face-to-face showdowns between Ireland fans and police, well, you don't see that very often. Next, we'll take a look at Brazil 2014, the last World Cup. Unfortunately, England crashed out in the group stage, while Germany went on to win the final against Argentina. As we'll see later, there were some serious confrontations between rival fans. But it wasn't just fans fighting fans. Some of the most violent incidents involved anti-World Cup demonstrators and the police. While many Brazilians were excited about the World Cup, there was a strong anti-World Cup mood from the start, with huge protests across the country. Protesters were angry that billions of pounds were being spent on the event, along with evictions and accusations of corruption. Demonstrations continued up to the start of the World Cup and throughout, building up to a violent protest during the Germany-Argentina final, just a few streets away from the stadium, where American filmmaker Nick Newman found himself right in the heart of the trouble.
My name is Nick Newman. I'm from San Francisco, California, and I went to the World Cup in Brazil in 2014. Went there as a filmmaker after I graduated college, and we just wanted to get out there and start filming. And we weren't really sure what we'd find, but we thought, well, no better place to start than Brazil at the World Cup. It was basically one giant party for the entire World Cup, especially in the 2 weeks during the group stages when everyone was out and about. Every night there was drinking, partying, music. The streets were alive. Every game when Brazil was playing, the whole city shut down and everyone was watching. Every goal, there were fireworks going off. And it was a party atmosphere everywhere you went in the city.
Nick captured the jubilation of US fans watching the group stage match against Ghana on Copacabana Beach.
You'd be surprised, and in fact, I was surprised at the amount of Americans in Brazil. There were actually more American fans than any other country, which was a little bit of a shock, but it was pretty awesome to see.
There were surprisingly few clashes between fans, but the authorities clearly weren't taking any chances.
During the games in Rio, I've never seen so many police in my life. The police presence was just absolutely insane. Everywhere you'd look, you'd see lines of cops, and not just normal police. We're talking like police in riot gear, and they were ready for the littlest thing to go down, they were going to pounce. The day of the final, we knew there was going to be a protest near the stadium. And from the people we had gotten to know while we were there, we heard that they were trying to make a break for the stadium. That was their plan. That was like, we're going to start in this Sans Peña Plaza, about a kilometer from the stadium, and then they were going to try to push towards it and just create a scene. So we started walking down the street with a whole bunch of people, and everything was fine, but the police presence was massive. I've never seen so many police in my life. And to call them police is kind of a polite way of saying they looked like robots almost. They were like fully decked out in military gear, armor, shields. And so it was a pretty intense atmosphere. Basically, we were in this one square, and every little outlet, there were lines of police, and like 20 police. In each street, there was no way to get through. So they were definitely confining us to a certain area. And so about an hour into the protest, people started trying to break through, and that's when things started getting crazy. It went from being a normal protest with heavy police presence to becoming, basically felt like a war zone. All of a sudden, I started being very fearful for my own safety. Everywhere you turn, there were more police, and it was scary. Everyone was just angry, and you could just sense when that first flashbang went off that the anger kind of bubbled up to the surface, and then it became a real fight. Once the police started firing flashbangs and tear gas into the crowd, people started to run away, try to get to the other side of the square, try to get away from the attacking police. And what happened was the police had surrounded the entire square, so there was nowhere to go. I was shocked. My heart was racing. Basically, the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I could go anywhere to get safe. That was the scariest part, not knowing what the police were capable of. And we did see the police attacking other journalists, hitting cameras out of people's hands. They weren't holding back. They were firing tear gas and flashbang grenades right into the crowd. I saw one flashbang blow up right next to someone's head. And it was just shocking for me, and my heart was racing the whole time. I saw many people getting attacked by the police. The protesters were causing trouble themselves, but they were facing police with batons and they were getting beaten down to the ground. And you felt like they could do anything. Like they were not going to hold back. If you were in their way, they weren't going to stop. It felt like we were in this square for years. It felt like an eternity. But I think ultimately it was probably 2 or 3 hours we were trapped in there. We were finally got out because we found a lawyer, and she walked with us and she took us out of the square. They kind of confined us in the square to hide us from the stadium, to hide us from the TV cameras, to keep us hidden away from everyone who was there to enjoy the games. They didn't want this to get out. They didn't want people to see what was really happening in Brazil.
Oh, fuck! Fuck!
Despite these violent clashes with the police, a party atmosphere was very much in the air. With a record total of 171 goals, there was much to celebrate. Total attendance in the stadiums was well over 3 million, and more than 5 million people were at the FIFA fan fests. Overall, there was a friendly atmosphere between rival fans, and with the huge police presence, it was generally safe for spectators. But not all fans managed to keep out of trouble. At this game between Croatia and Mexico, a mass brawl breaks out after Mexico's first goal. Reportedly, goal celebrations turned nasty when beer was sprayed in the air, resulting in over 20 people scrapping in the stadium. Officials quickly attend, with some launching themselves into the fighting mob to calm things down. Beer and other missiles continue to fly overhead. Officials try to detain a man, but he struggles free. Meanwhile, in the midst of the trouble, one man has managed to stay calm, smoke his cigarette, and continue to watch the game. In what started out as a street party, things get crazy when these Brazilian and Argentinian fans start throwing bottles. And a large cardboard box. 1,400 England fans with football violence-related convictions were banned from the Brazil World Cup with good results. According to police, there were a total of 20,000 fans from England and only 22 arrests, and the vast majority of those were for ticket touting. But that didn't mean England fans were angels. Coming up, we'll find out what happened when 2 English fans had a violent encounter during the Brazil World Cup between themselves. And with the Russia World Cup on the agenda, we'll take a look at some of the most violent and crazy Russian fans. A huge majority of World Cup 2018 tickets have been allocated to Russian fans. Most, of course, are well-behaved supporters who go to football to enjoy themselves and support their local and national teams. But then there are the others. Some Spartak Moscow fans are well known for their troublemaking tendencies. This rogue fan has invaded the pitch, stopping the match. Eventually, he heads back to the stands, but the official forces him around the barrier. He escapes from the steward, but jumps straight into a squad of armed police. However, his fellow fans are not having any of it, and they rush to his rescue, which sparks further clashes with police. After some pushing and shoving, the violence suddenly escalates as hardcore fans make a wild assault on the police. Then things get even uglier, as riot police make their way through the violent crowd and then have to fend off a barrage of chairs and missiles. Surprisingly, as you can see at the top of the screen, the match is still on. For now, anyway. But the violence is spreading, and now there's mayhem all along this end of the stadium. As the police struggle to control the crowd, they call in reinforcements and a water cannon. Match officials had no choice but to abandon the game, leaving police to deal with the riot. The fans continue to trash the stadium, hurling seats at the police and leaving them with nowhere to sit at the next game. The notorious Spartak Moscow fans caused devastation more recently in clashes with police and rival fans ahead of the game with Atletico Bilbao. Sadly, a police officer died after suffering a heart attack during the violence. Riot police tried to disperse the crowd as they continue to battle each other in the streets of Bilbao. Individual fans are picked off and violently attacked. Police make a few arrests before coming under fire from missiles. And this fan makes the mistake of walking towards them before quickly retreating to the sidelines as the police get ready for more crowd control. Back at the Brazil World Cup in 2014, in an incident at the England-Uruguay match, a fan had part of his ear bitten off. According to reports, the thug in the dark blue had been taunting the fan in the white England top. And when the incident escalated, it resulted in a vicious attack, leaving the fan in the white England top covered in blood and missing part of his ear. We spoke to Alex, the England fan who filmed it, to find out more.
I first started watching England about 30 years ago in my late 20s. Primarily just went to home matches then. But in the last 12 years, I've been more serious about following them. So that's been tournaments and going away to see England play, as well as most of the home matches at Wembley. There's usually a fantastic atmosphere away from home. And what better place to go and see a new country watching football with your mates? A lot of the perks of watching England play is getting to see the world. So I've already been to Russia to see England play. I've been to Israel. Went over to Brazil 2014. It's a long way to go for just one match and 3 nights, but for me, I just had to go. You know, it's a spiritual home of football, and the opportunity to see England play in the World Cup against Uruguay was just too tempting to miss. It was worth it. You know, I got to see another huge city in Sao Paulo where there was a carnival atmosphere. Went to the fan zone 2 days before our match, where Brazil played Mexico. They drew 0-0, but it was just a fantastic atmosphere. When the final whistle blew and it became obvious that we'd not only lost that match, but we were no longer in the tournament and we'd all be going home, the atmosphere did change within the crowd. There were some scuffles in front of me. I then heard a noise behind. I turned around, and as you can see quite clearly from the video, you've got a guy running across the seats towards the exit, catches up with somebody, punches him. By all accounts, according to the media, when we got back, that this is where that lad had his ear bitten off. There was no anger at all during the match. I think the occasion was far too big for that, and the expectations. Everybody had hoped that England were going to progress, at least get the equaliser, maybe go on to extra time and possibly penalties, but it wasn't to be. You can hear on the video that people are shocked. But generally, the feeling was that it was an isolated incident. Okay, so it's the end of the match. The players are starting to leave the pitch. I hear a commotion behind me. Quickly turn around, see the lad running through the seats. Bang, hits him once. Goes into the gantry, starts punching again. People start to kind of try and break it up. Still seem to be punching. And here we go in the slow motion. Boom. I mean, that's quite some punch, isn't it?
Back in the UK, the man in the dark blue was arrested. And although he denied biting the fan's ear, he did admit to being involved in the fracas. He was banned from matches for 3 years. So, what should we expect for the Russia World Cup? It's the first time Russia has ever hosted a World Cup tournament, so fans don't really have any idea what to expect. What we do know is that Russia has spent over £7 billion on 12 venues, including a shiny makeover of the Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow, where the final will be staged. But it's not the football that's causing the biggest concerns. It's the threat of what might happen off the pitch. So what do English football fans think?
Russian hooligans are getting ready for the England fans, and I don't really fancy being duffed over in a foreign country.
There's a few friends of mine who aren't going, who could go, and they have said that they're not going to go just because they're not sure how safe they will be.
Russian firms are notoriously a lot worse than people think they are. And I think even in the 70s and 80s here, organised firms in football don't compare to the level that Russians are on, and that would be a massive worry for me.
I am going as part of an organised tour to this tournament. I don't usually do it this way, but this time I will be. Just for my own protection, I think.
It's common knowledge that the relationship between the Russian fans and British fans isn't the best, and there's been all sorts of threats and bits and pieces from them saying that when we get over there, there's going to be some comings together. Hopefully, the segregation by the police and the security will keep that down, and we'll have a really great tournament.
And what does Martin think will happen in Russia?
I cannot believe that it's being held in Russia. There is going to be so much trouble there. Any England fans who go there, I feel sorry for them. There's going to be so much trouble. And they ain't going to know what's it. The flashpoint ain't going to necessarily be with England fans, it's going to be with the Polish fans. And the Poles and the Russians have got big history, going back to Euro 2012. It went mental. You had armed police with machine guns, it still couldn't stop the trouble. So the flashpoint out in Russia is going to be Poland and Russia, not necessarily England and Russia.
The FIFA World Cup Russian chief, Alexei Sorokin, reassured football fans that Russia is taking all appropriate measures to make sure the tournament will be safe and comfortable. He said, "We're certain that everyone who comes to our country will enjoy it." And Russian politician Igor Lebedev added not a single tourist has any reason to fear travelling to our country in the summer of 2018. But how seriously do the Russians take their fan fight culture? Well, a new wave of extreme and violent groups calling themselves ultras have emerged in recent years.
The world of ultra football support is on a different platform to that of hooliganism. They have social media to spread pictures of themselves wearing balaclavas and with their pyrotechnic displays, which hooligan culture just didn't have access to.
Plus, there are hundreds of clips of them fighting each other on the internet. Be warned, there are some brutal clips coming up. In this clip, two rival gangs have arranged a fight in a forest. They've made it tops versus skins to help them work out who's who.
The phenomenon of training for violence in football is relatively rare in the UK, but does seem to be on the rise elsewhere. And the purpose of that training is to make a more equipped group.
Here, another battle rages, allegedly as part of a hooligan training programme for the 2016 Euros. According to one comment, the teams have tactics, and it's not just random violence. Along with their mascot dog, these fighters make it a bit harder by brawling in the snow. Despite the slippery conditions, the violence is just as intense. But it's all friends at the end. However, it's not just Russian fans who take part in fights like these. These Danish and Swedish hooligans have a 40-on-40 pitch battle on a quiet country road. The Reds cause absolute carnage as they pick off the other fighters. And these other Swedish fans are going 270 on 200. Not surprisingly, the 270 in black have a slight advantage. The last time England faced Russia in a major football tournament was the Euros 2016 in France. Before the England versus Russia match in Marseille had even begun, there were running battles between rival fans in the old port area of the town. Many England fans accused the Russian ultras of ambushing them in what appeared to be a pre-planned attack. In this particular clash, the Russians attacked England fans in a narrow street before being outnumbered and pushed back. Later, as the final whistle blew on the 1-1 draw between the teams, England fans were forced to flee from more Russian attackers who invaded their section of the stadium, unleashing violent attacks on any England fans unfortunate enough to be within their grasp. Many fans were hospitalised, with 2 supporters seriously injured. The violence was so serious, it almost ended with both teams getting kicked out of the competition. Next, we'll take a look at clashes with police and what the Russians can expect from some of the worst fans around the world. The Russian police are expected to come down hard on hooligans at the 2018 World Cup. To get an idea of what kind of tactics to expect, let's take a look at how police in other countries handle trouble with fans. After fighting in the stands gets out of hand, these Brazilian fans try to get out to safety, but the police respond with pepper spray. The police hold firm and won't even let the injured out for help. In Amsterdam, Dutch police charge out of a side street to take the England fans by surprise, and batons are their weapon of choice. Then the Dutch police bring out the horses. These PSG supporters are facing off with French police. Families caught up in the situation are desperately trying to get out of the way before this happens. Finally, the hooligans decide it's time to move on. In Poland, these fans are trying to force open the fence to let fellow supporters into the stadium. Initially, they're fended off by pepper spray. Then the fans on the outside help to prise it open, and around 50 of them storm into the stadium. Finally, the police charge in to secure the gates and calm things down. These Swedish hooligans have cordoned off a road, but the police are taking no prisoners. Not wanting to be intimidated, the thugs find an array of weapons, including road signs, to attack them. This chap tries to use a bicycle to attack the police van, only for a fellow fan to calm him down. This hooded thug thinks he can push back the van with a simple shove. Then it's bike versus police van again. At a Europa League playoff in Manchester, these Spanish and Polish fans are fighting with chairs. Now, the problem is, when one side runs out of chairs, it usually means the other side has all of them. And back in Poland, flares are used to attack opposing fans. It looks like a giant game of firework ping-pong as fans duck down out of the way before firing them back. Now, some of them try to hide behind a giant flag before this happens. If you've ever wondered how flammable these flags can be, here's another one, still at the same game. These Brazilian football hooligans were filmed by residents overlooking the action. It gets brutal as they battle with steel poles. And gets even more violent when one of them produces a flare gun and starts shooting. Incredibly, despite the extreme violence, no one appears to be seriously injured. Eventually, one side gives in and makes a run for it, and the other group are hot on their heels. Despite the trouble that sometimes accompanies it, the vast majority of fans are usually extremely well behaved and get a great deal of enjoyment from the sport. Absolutely anyone can get a kick out of it. This deaf and blind man is attending a match for the very first time. His friend is using a table to help him follow the game. Goal! Fans can show their love for football in many non-violent ways. From the Irish fans' songs to the Icelandic supporters' synchronised clapping. Even the weird and wonderful ways to get to the ground. And massive games of keepy-uppy. Although doing it by a canal can have its downsides. Luckily, there's a fan swimming past, on hand to rescue the ball. That's almost it for this special World Cup edition of Fights Camera Action. Come back again for more crazy, wild and dramatic moments caught on camera by people right there in the heart of the action. In the meantime, here are some reminders of what to look out for or avoid if you happen to be heading to the Russia World Cup. Oh, and don't forget to enjoy the football too.